Welcome back to the Unarmored Talk podcast, everyone. Happy New Year. It is 2025, the first episode of this amazing year as we continue to produce episodes that hopefully helps you think, self-reflect, and develop a more accurate way of thinking for yourself by hearing unarmored discussions to learn not only about the guest, but also to help you learn more about yourself. I'm still your host, Mario P. Fields, as we are headed towards our fifth year in production. And I would like to thank all of the guests, the 100 plus guests who have come on the show, including our amazing guest we have today. His name is Garret Biss. He is a United States Marine Corps veteran, did about 17 years of active service. Thank you for your service, Garret. Thank you for protecting our nation's most precious jewel called freedom. How you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing well, Sergeant Major, and thank you for your service as well. I'm really excited for this opportunity. It's great that it worked out to be on my, I won't say how many years, but on my birthday. So I love this idea of some self-reflection. I'm excited to see what we dig into. But first and foremost, thanks for having me.
My pleasure, my friend. My pleasure, you guys. But he's done a lot of things in the private sector that's outside of that military sector and in the Department of Defense. And but the key thing about Garret is he's a humanitarian at heart, believing in helping veterans, those who have served, and more. We'll get into the introduction, but before we do that, thank you everybody for another year of sharing and downloading the Unarmored Talk episodes, either on audio or watching the videos on YouTube. They always generate donations, right? Charitable dollars. And this year will be our seventh. When I say seventh year, that's Still Serving Incorporated, seventh year giving back to the schools in Pitt County, North Carolina. So thank you so much. And if you want to learn more about our amazing nonprofit, when I say our, that's me, the founder, and my wife, Nicole, who's been supporting me since we founded it in 2018. Just visit www.stillservinginc.com, right? www.stillservinginc.com. And you can learn more about what we have done to the two schools in upcoming a third school that we've adopted since 2018. The admin stuff is done. You guys know how we roll on this show. Let's get to our amazing guest. Garret, do me a favor, man. Tell the listeners and viewers a little bit about who Garret is.
So I don't know where to jump in. We'll just get into it. So as you mentioned, I was a Marine for still a Marine. I served active duty for 17 years and then was offered an early retirement. I didn't know it was a thing when I enlisted, but they offered it to me. So I took it and then had to figure out what I want to do when I grow up. So had some ambitions. I tell people that I had this long list of things that I said I wanted to do while I was in the Marines, and I always had that excuse. So if I was in the Marine Corps, I'd do this. I'd go, get into real estate. I'd write some books. I'd do some, travel, nonprofit stuff. And then when they offered me that early retirement, I feel like they pulled my card and they're like, all right, it's time to follow through. So I did spend some time doing some searching, trying to figure out who I was. At that point, I was really well in tune with who Captain Biss at the time was. But honestly, I didn't really know who Garret Biss was. If you took off that uniform, removed that identity, took me out of that specific role, who was I? What are the things that made me tick? What are the things that are most true to me? And that's been a journey that continues to unfold. Unfortunately, like a lot of veterans, like too many veterans, when I transitioned out of the military, I entered a really, really dark place as I was trying to figure these things out. I know I shared this with you, but if any of your viewers want to check it out, I recently did a TEDx talk called The Unspoken Trauma That All Veterans Face. And without too many spoiler alerts, the gist of it is the answer I've come to understand as to why so many veterans struggle with that transition from military service. We look at a population of veterans, 19 million of them presently in the country, about 9 million in the workforce, but a population with 200% greater likelihood of mental health challenges, struggling with addiction, at least 57% greater chance of committing suicide. Unfortunately, that number continues to rise. We look at post 9/11 veterans, 1 in 5 post 9/11 veterans is going to experience PTSD in their life. So that was me. I had that journey. I had anxiety. I had panic attacks. I got to the, kind of the tipping point for me was when the suicidal ideations weren't surprising me or weren't shocking me anymore. And thank goodness I found a journey to a better place. But all along on that journey, as things were improving and some things were coming together in my own life, I'm also looking back over my shoulder a little bit like, what the heck was that? How do I understand what I just went through? And once I got, sure enough footing, how do I explain what I went through in a way that can help some other veterans understand that journey so that I can help them avoid some of that pain and suffering that too many veterans experience?
Garrett, you've done it, and I watch your TEDx talk, and your TED talk, and everyone that will be in the show notes. So I encourage if you guys get the time to watch it. But you mentioned something that I hear often a lot, and I also experience it a lot in my other passion as a United States Department of Employment facilitator for transitioning service members and families. And that is that identity. If I put a mic in front of a Marine, a soldier, sailor's, face, and I go, and they're on active duty, and I go, what's your identity? "Oh, I'm a petty officer, third class.
Right.
I'm an operations specialist. I'm a captain. I'm a sergeant major." But then when that's gone, what are you? So when you went through that journey, what did you discover about you when that captain, that United States active duty Marine identity was removed?
Just, kind of like awakening from a dream, but awakening into a nightmare, awakening into a place where I didn't know who I was. I didn't
Mhm.
know what my role was. There's a lot of times with that identity that we have, we draw our sense of value or our sense of worth from being in that role. And when you remove that, it really leaves you, in this new space, kind of floating around in space is almost what it felt like, trying to figure out, okay, I know what I was, and now I'm this thing called veteran. I still don't really understand what that is at that time, but there's a lot of things that I can no longer say are about me that I've lost, and now there's a void, and I got to figure out what's that new identity look like. One thing that's particularly challenging, and I think this leads to a lot of the interpersonal challenges that veterans face, and I'll speak from the Marine context, but I understand, and I've come to understand this idea of a dichotomous ego. And by that I mean kind of a two-sided ego. And in the Marine Corps, what I experienced was when I put on that uniform, even from the first days down at Paris Island, or maybe after the Crucible when I got the Eagle Globe and Anchor pinned on my chest, what I realized was with that experience and with this new identity I had, there was a lot of elements of that lifted me up, that filled me up, that now I was representative of, and this role that I now had is
Mhm.
something that comes with a lot of self-respect, a lot of admiration, a lot of value from the outside, certainly a lot of value and pride that we can have from what we've proven of ourselves. So there's a lot of things from just putting on that uniform that help lift us up, help lift up our confidence, our self-esteem, and our understanding of the value that we have. But at the same time, I also remember I always needed to run faster. I always needed to get my boots shinier. There was always somebody that could do another pull up than I could do, or bench press a couple more pounds.
Yeah.
Maybe my floor wasn't as shiny as the dudes, across the hall from me in the barracks. So there was always this other really hyper competitive nature to us, which is beautiful because it always helped inspire us to continue to grow. But there was like that was the counterbalance to this weight. Like we're superhuman in one regard, but we're also, defective and constantly need to refine in this other hand. But there's a beautiful balancing that comes from that. Well, what happens when you take off your uniform for the last time? Which side of that ego, which set of those voices in your head do you lose? When you take off that uniform and you hang it up in the closet, you lose everything that lifted you up. Unfortunately, a lot of those behaviors of those thought processes of constantly needing to improve and not being good enough just as I am, those things still hang around because that's still a part of you. So now we have this out of balance, or this out of balance ego that's going on, or this internal dialogue, or this internal feeling, which I think is a huge barrier or a huge boulder that prevents veterans from kind of leaning into that next life.
Well said. And I'm listening to you, Garrett, and I started self-reflecting myself, where I had this like I'm invincible. I Babe, I can do it. Mario, your back is done. Don't worry about it. Little
Hmm.
Motrin, a little water, it'll buff out. And the next thing you know, I'm in the ER.
Right. That's right.
And I love how you said, kind of you get that Eagle Globe and Anchor, and now you are doing meaningful work. You go home and you feel good. At what point? in your post military journey did you finally find something that was meaningful to Garrett, where now your identity is with you doing meaningful work outside of wearing the uniform?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's certainly shown up in a lot of different ways, but there's this common theme to everything that has been most meaningful and everything that's brought more joy and fulfillment to my life without the additional baggage of pain, suffering, or sacrifice that comes with it. And that's this theme that I really, excuse me, really been reflecting on right now, especially at this time of year when we're talking about self-reflection and kind of setting a vision for the upcoming year, is this theme is all wrapped around authenticity. And I've come to, or I'm still contending with this. I don't know if it's a theory yet or if it's still a hypothesis, but my hypothesis at least is that all of human experience, all any source of pain or suffering that we experience comes from a divergence between who we are and how we're showing up in the world. And the difference between the two, that's the breeding ground for the lack, for the want, for the fear, for the shame, for the self-judgment, for
Yeah.
the physiological diseases or the mental health diseases. And the more I reflect on that, that's kind of become my guiding star now, is what feels most authentic and right to me. And when I can discern that, that gives me a clear indicator to move in a certain direction or in a right direction. And what has felt most authentic to me recently is getting crystal clear on this message and finding ways to serve others to help them
Mhm.
avoid some unnecessary or avoidable pain and suffering in their life. And the biggest part of that message that I'm still still investigating and trying to articulate as best I can is that when we can live more authentically, when we can bring that delta from who we are inherently and authentically and how we're showing up in the world behind the masks that we wear, behind the projections that we have, when we can bring those two together, that's the only true pathway to wellness, whether it's physiological or emotional wellness.
Garrett, I love it. Yeah, I really applaud you on how you're choosing to do this. I mean, it's a choice unless you're insane. And I'm not laughing because I
Mhm.
definitely have been around folks who have been insane, and I have almost been insane. It is not a fun experience. But I bring this up because you didn't have to choose to continue to explore who am I? Why do I feel like I'm not doing meaningful work? And then to discover this is meaning for me is to continue to do things to help other people, to help veterans, to reduce those mental health challenges. I mean, we can't get rid of them, but at least we can cope with them. And then being authentic. You're on a show. You're removing your armor, and this is who you are. On the show. Looking back, I want you to think about this one. If you was a consultant for yourself, all right, you were your own consultant when you were about to get out and what you have experienced now in post military, what advice would you give yourself right before you got out years ago?
Mm. So I would say that as life moves forward, you're going to have a lot of decisions to make. Simple decisions from where you go to a restaurant this evening, where if you decide to move, what kind of career field you want to get to, if you want to go back to school. There's going to be millions of decisions. Sometimes you're going to base that, or you're going to find an option, and that option is going to be something that's going to help fill a void inside of you. Maybe
Hmm.
you need external validation, maybe you need to prove yourself, maybe you need more money because of what that's going to provide in the sense of security. Sometimes you're going to have an option that will help reduce that void that's inside of you. If you can determine or decipher the difference between the two and tend towards this direction that's going to fill this void and help you feel whole regardless of what's going on around you, if you can discern that, then choose those decisions whenever you can.
Garrett, I wish I would have had this episode before I retired in 2018 because the emotional decision I made to retire in SoCal cost me like 20K.
Yeah,
Because I was like, I was just doing that to fill a void.
right.
And then, of course, to come back here in Jacksonville is more accurate, a more thought through decision. So, thank you. As I'm on the post side of that, well, great advice. I know you're going to charge me and invoice me for that. So, just putting that 30 on it.
Yeah,
It
tell
put
you what, you help me find my way into front of other audiences that can help benefit from this message. We'll call it even.
Well, and I'm so happy you're doing this on your birthday. Well, you guys know the deal. Unarmored Talk. You know, as soon as the interview started, it's over. But if I had it my way, we would have hour-long episodes because I we just have amazing guests. And Garrett, I'm not going to be selfish and keep you on the show. But thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for your amazing Unarmored Talk discussion. Any last remarks you want to leave our listeners and viewers?
I got a request, and that's if anybody has a thought that comes to mind or a question after hearing the start of this discussion, let's continue the conversation. I'll be looking in the comments for where the episodes are posted. You can also find me. LinkedIn's most likely the best place to find me. Let's continue this conversation. I'd love to hear your thoughts and your reflections, maybe any lessons that you've learned about this battle with who we are and authentically and how we're showing up in the world and things that you've learned. I'd love to continue that conversation. And please check out my TEDx talk. Share it with any veterans that you know. You can find that at unspokentrauma.vet.
You guys heard it, unspoken trauma dot vet. Garrett, thank you so much, my friend. Again, happy 29th birthday. You look
That's
good,
right.
man.
All right. I appreciate it.
You look good. Well, be safe out there, Simplify Garrett, and everyone. You guys know the deal. In a couple of weeks, we'll have another episode coming your way. But until next time for 2025, I will continue to pray. Nicole and I will continue to pray for you, your families, your friends, and a special prayer for everyone impacted by the natural disasters in Southern California. And we just pray that those fires, first responders, and everyone else, and we just pray that they continue to work hard and we minimize loss of life out there for all of our Southern California friends and families. Garrett, be safe. We'll talk to you soon, man.
I appreciate you.
Take care.